Have you ever asked yourself, why does chasing her only seem to push her further away? Or worse, why does silence seem to make her come back while your sincerity only drove her off? If that question has haunted you, you're not alone. There's a common belief, almost sacred among men, that if you love hard enough, if you care deep enough, if you prove your loyalty relentlessly, she'll finally see your worth. But what if I told you that belief is not just wrong, it's the exact reason you're losing the game before you even realize it started? We've been sold the dangerous myth that being emotionally available at all times equals strength. That proving yourself equals winning her back. But here's the truth, one they never teach you in romantic comedies or self-help books. The moment you act like she doesn't matter, not out of ego, but out of inner mastery, that's when everything shifts. That's when she starts to feel the absence. That's when her mind begins to unravel. And it's not magic. It's Stoicism. It's power through stillness. It's control through detachment. You might be thinking, isn't indifference cold? Isn't silence immature? Those are fair questions. But what if I told you that your silence isn't the absence of emotion, it's the presence of discipline? What if detaching isn't avoidance, but the highest form of emotional intelligence? We're diving into a deeper truth today, one that's not about manipulation, games, or fake confidence. This is about something real. Real emotional power. Real masculine strength. Real Stoic relationships. If you've ever wondered how to flip the dynamic, how to reclaim your peace, and how to make her feel what she lost, this is your roadmap. In this journey, you're not just going to sit still. You're going to rise. Each part of this message has the potential to challenge everything you thought you knew about heartbreak, attachment, and masculine presence. And the best part? This isn't fantasy. This is ancient philosophy turned modern clarity. This is Stoicism in motion. We're going to uncover the mechanics of attraction, the psychology of absence, and the truth about what makes a man unforgettable, not by proving his worth, but by remembering it. So buckle up. Because by the end of this video, you won't just know what to do, you'll feel it in your bones. There's a reason she loses her mind when you act like she doesn't matter. And when you see why, you'll never chase the same way again. Stick around, because the last part might just change everything. 1. Detachment is not pretending, it's power. Have you noticed that the moment you try to prove you matter, by texting again, by explaining yourself, by chasing, her interest dissolves? It's like quicksand. The harder you struggle, the deeper you sink. What if the secret isn't in proving yourself, but in detaching? What if the true power lies not in commentary or reaction, but in your ability to pause everything and stand firm in absence? Detachment doesn't mean bitterness. It's not indifference wrapped in sarcasm or playing games. It's not about being cold or punishing her. Let's be absolutely clear. Detachment is the act of choosing your inner life over external validation. It's a conscious shift of focus, from chasing her emotion to mastering your own. And that shift is potent because it flips the dynamic entirely. You see, Stoicism teaches us that the only thing within your control is your own mind. Emotions are natural, but once you give them free rein, you hand your power over to someone else. This is exactly how you lose yourself after a breakup. You chase like a moth toward a flame, blinded by desire, burning your peace. Real men don't chase. They choose. So let's break it down. Detachment is power because it stops the emotional bleed. Standing firm in silence, without guilt or drama, sends a message. The message isn't, I don't care. It's, I care about me more. And that's an energy shift that commands attention. Instead of being drawn to your vulnerability, she's pulled into the mystery of your restraint. Ask yourself, when was the last time someone truly missed you because you went quiet? When absence isn't a dramatic withdrawal, but a calm withdrawal, it doesn't scream, it resonates. It creates space. Space for mystery. Space for projection. Space for her to fill in the blanks with her own curiosity, her own guilt, her own questions. Chasing amplifies her power. Detachment reclaims yours. Have you ever tried deleting her number, removing her texts, but then caught yourself rewatching her Instagram? That's not detachment. That's emotional whack-a-mole. You think you've buried the problem, but the minute your guard slips, the impulse rebounds. True detachment isn't transactional. You don't withdraw and then peek. You don't drop breadcrumbs. You go completely dark. This is not martyrdom. This is not punishing her. This is not feeding your pride at someone else's expense. This is about choosing yourself, your discipline, your inner peace, your forward momentum. When you pull away, unceremoniously and absolutely, you're embodying your own value. Because if you have to chase to be seen, you weren't seen in the first place. The fascinating truth about humans: we never miss what's predictable. We miss what's rare, what's gone, what can't be accessed anymore. That's why detachment is more effective than confrontation. A fight gets fast reactions. Silence invites slow-burning regret. A fight might make her defensive. Silence makes her introspective. Which path leads her inward? Which path gives her space to feel? This is Stoicism applied to relationships, Stoic relationships. The goal isn't to hurt. The goal isn't to pretend. The goal is to reclaim your focus, to control your reactions, and to show that your emotional ecosystem is self-sustaining, not dependent on her. Because once she sees that you don't need her presence to be whole, something shifts. She starts to question why she left. She wonders if she misjudged the strength she discarded. But let's be generous, you need to mean it. This has to be real. You can't half detach. You can't ghost her chats and then peek while she sleeps. You can't stay logged into her world while acting like you're not. If your detachment isn't authentic, she'll feel it. And that's worse than chasing, it's performing. If you're performing detachment, you're still emotionally attached. And that only makes you pathetic. Real detachment is invisible. It's untraceable. It's not about her seeing you withdraw. It's about her feeling it. And here's the catch: detachment isn't comfortable. Power never is. It means embracing uncertainty. It means your heart might sting. You might wake up wanting to message. You might feel hungry for connection. That discomfort? That's exactly the point. Growth lies on the other side of resistance. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about refusing to be commandeered by it. You're asking, how long should I stay detached? The answer is, until the silence does its work for you first. You detach until your center is solid without her. You detach until you're not pendulous. You're not pulled by absence. You're not drifting. You detach until you're in full alignment with your life, your mission, your values, not waiting for her validation to breathe. This is transformational. This flips the dynamic. Not by trickery, but by absence of reaction. It's like removing the chess piece she thought controlled the board. And suddenly, the whole game changes. Picture this: you stop texting back, but instead of crying into your pillow, you go to the gym, you write your book, you meditate, you rebuild your friendship circle. You don't withdraw from life, you withdraw from one person's emotional gravity. That shift is magnetic. In Stoic relationships, actions speak. Silence speaks. Withdrawal draws, not pushes. Most men read this and think, but what if she sees my silence as cold? That's the point. Emotional control isn't warm. It's not gentle. It's not about appeasing. It's about anchoring. And yes, it might hurt her. And yes, somehow she will notice. But that's not the objective. The objective is internal alignment. A man who is uncompromising with his peace. A man who values himself even when it's inconvenient. Does it sound harsh? Maybe. But be honest. Would you rather hurt her with controlled silence or destroy yourself in frantic pursuit? The Stoics didn't teach martyrdom, they taught mastery. Mastery over your desires, your attachments, your emotional reflexes. When you act like she doesn't matter, meaning you're done leaking your soul into her world, that's when she really notices. Now I want you to ask yourself this: what's more valuable, sending one more text or preserving one more moment of self-respect? Because that moment is everything. That moment is where power lies. Not in explanation. Not in apology. Not in convincing. Power is in detachment. And remember, the silence isn't indefinite. It's purposeful. It serves a purpose, to rebuild your inner world. So you don't detach to punish. You detach to become whole. When she stops seeing you as available, she starts seeing you as present, but not for her. Present for yourself. Present for your mission. Present in your growth. Detachment demands coherence. Silence demands conviction. Your actions demand alignment. And that coherence? That's irresistible. That's magnetic. That's transformation. That's Stoicism. That's the kind of presence that leaves your absence louder than any words ever could. 2. Your silence speaks louder than apologies. Let's ask a serious question. When has explaining yourself ever actually worked? When has pouring your heart out in a 2 a.m. text ever brought her closer? When has spelling out your pain with trembling hands ever made her realize your worth? The truth? It usually does the opposite. Not because your words weren't real, not because your emotions weren't valid, but because the more you talk, the less she hears. And what you don't realize is, your silence would have spoken louder than anything you could have said. Silence isn't the absence of communication. It's a deeper form of it. A language only understood in hindsight. And for those who have wronged you, those who took your love for granted, dismissed your loyalty, downplayed your presence, silence becomes the reckoning they never expected. You don't scream your worth. You withdraw it. And that withdrawal? That void? That's what echoes. The reason silence hits harder than apologies is because it forces reflection. It takes away the noise. And humans are terrible with silence. They fill it with assumptions, with stories, with what-ifs. When you're no longer messaging her, reacting to her posts, checking in on her birthday, you create a vacuum. And in that vacuum, her mind begins to spiral. Not because you manipulated anything, but because you stopped trying. You stopped proving. You stopped bleeding to be understood. Let's be honest, men are often conditioned to fix, to solve, to bridge gaps. But Stoicism doesn't reward the fixer, it honors the one who lets what's broken stay broken. Because when you remain silent, you force her to sit in the consequences of her own decisions. She doesn't get to have your emotional labor as her safety net anymore. She doesn't get your voice to ease her guilt. All she gets is distance. Unyielding, unapologetic distance. Have you ever noticed that the ones who leave you in confusion are the ones you think about the longest? That's not a coincidence. That's the psychology of absence. When someone stops responding, not to hurt you, but because they've elevated beyond explanation, you don't forget them. You remember every silence. You analyze every shift. And now, when you become that silence, you become unforgettable. And here's the deeper layer. Your silence must come from peace, not from pride. If you're silent just to get a reaction, that's manipulation. That's noise in disguise. But if your silence is born from clarity, when you've realized that your worth doesn't need permission, that your love doesn't need performance, it becomes the most attractive form of power. Most men fold. They talk, explain, vent, cry, plead. And every word they spill is a leak in the ship of their dignity. But the man who simply goes quiet, who doesn't announce his withdrawal, doesn't justify his absence, doesn't send one last message, that man burns in her memory far longer than the one who begged. Because he left no closure. Just presence. Just calm. Just gone. Let's not pretend this is easy. Silence requires immense strength. It's not passive, it's chosen. It's a daily decision to not reach out. To not explain yourself. To not perform. That's why silence isn't just the absence of speech. It's the presence of mastery. And this kind of silence? It haunts. Because it's not angry. It's not dramatic. It's clean. Final. And in its simplicity, it delivers a more powerful message than 1,000 apologies ever could. So how does she feel when you go quiet? At first, she might shrug. She might assume you're playing games. That's her ego talking. But as days pass, and your energy remains detached, your presence remains absent, her confidence starts to crack. Not because she misses you immediately, but because she no longer has access to your energy. That's the part that triggers her ego. She expected you to chase. She expected to see your name pop up. But when it doesn't, when the silence continues, something shifts inside her. She begins to feel the absence. And absence creates contrast. It forces her to reflect on what she had. And reflection is what breeds regret. Not confrontation. Not arguments. But quiet, heavy, undeniable space. That's what hits hardest. That's what makes your silence louder than any words you could say. Still, some of you are wondering, what if she never notices? Here's the beauty of silence. It's not about her noticing. It's about you detaching. True Stoic relationships aren't built on reactions. They're grounded in self-mastery. You go silent because you respect your peace, not because you need her attention. The outcome is a bonus. The discipline is the goal. And sometimes, yes, she won't spiral immediately. Sometimes, she won't even react for weeks. But trust this, the longer your silence continues, the heavier it gets. At some point, she will scroll through her phone looking for your name. She'll reread your last message. She'll hover over the send message button. And even if she doesn't act on it, she feels it. Your absence speaks in ways your words never could. Because again, apologies can be ignored. Text can be deleted. But silence? Silence gets remembered. It shows her you don't need closure. You don't need validation. You don't need her to understand anything. You've simply moved on. You've taken your peace with you. And that's what cuts deepest, not your pain, but your peace. Think about the relationships that broke you. Was it the yelling that hurt most? The blocked messages? Or was it the moment you realized they were simply done? No drama. No goodbye. Just silence. That's what pierces the soul. That's the echo you hear at 2 a.m. And now you hold that same power, not to wound, but to walk away with grace. Your silence shows her something no apology ever could, that your love was real, your standards are higher, and your self-respect is non-negotiable. You don't argue to be chosen. You don't explain to be accepted. You simply choose yourself. And that self-selection? That internal validation? That's the foundation of Stoicism. A man who can hold silence is a man who can lead himself. He's not swayed by emotion. He's not baited into chaos. He doesn't hand over his power for the sake of closure. He is closure. His silence is the ending. His detachment is the lesson. And women remember that. Even if they don't admit it. Even if they never say it. They feel it. Deeply. So what now? Do you disappear forever? Do you cut her off completely? Not necessarily. Silence isn't about revenge. It's about rhythm. You fall back until the rhythm of your own life becomes louder than the memory of her. You choose stillness until her noise no longer affects you. That's when you know your silence did its job. And if, by chance, she does come back, remember, the goal was never to win her. The goal was to win yourself back. You don't break your silence because she reached out. You break it only if it serves your peace. And sometimes, the strongest move is to stay quiet, even when the door reopens. Because the man who speaks less holds more power. And the man who walks in silence leads with presence. If you're feeling the weight of this, it's because your instincts know it's true. You've been noisy too long. You've explained too much. You've tried too hard. And none of it gave you what you needed. So now, let your silence carry you forward. Not as punishment, but as evolution. And if you've made it this far, if this resonated in your chest and not just your mind, then take a moment right now to let it settle. Feel the strength of your silence. Feel the power of not reacting. And when you're ready, help someone else rise the way you're rising now. Like this video, comment, number 1, if it spoke to you, And if you're serious about mastering your emotional discipline and embracing the power of Stoic relationships, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're only getting started. Stay silent. Stay powerful. Stay untouchable. 3. You become a mirror, and she sees herself. There's a moment, right after the silence begins, where you feel invisible. Like your absence has vanished into a void. You wonder if she noticed. If she even flinched. And in those early days, it might feel like you're losing. But let me tell you something most men never realize until much later. Your silence isn't just silence. It's a mirror. And sooner or later, she'll be forced to look into it and see herself, not you. That's the power of stillness. That's the philosophy behind Stoic relationships. When you stop broadcasting your pain, when you stop responding to her chaos, her tests, her withdrawals, you don't just disappear. You reflect. You become the consequence she never expected. And that consequence doesn't scream. It just exists. Quiet, composed, undeniable. Her ego was prepared for anger. She was braced for jealousy, bitterness, maybe even retaliation. But she wasn't ready for nothing. And in that nothing, she sees everything. You see, when you were emotionally available. Always texting back, always explaining, always stepping into her emotional storm, you were shielding her from the consequences of her actions. You gave her emotional cover. You softened the impact of her distance, her dismissiveness, her decisions. But when you go silent, when you pull your energy back without permission, that cover is gone. And what's left? Just her. Her decisions. Her coldness. Her selfishness. Her silence mirrored back to her, now amplified by your calm. Have you ever noticed that some people only start reflecting once the noise ends? That as long as you're reacting, they stay blind? That's not an accident. That's how many people avoid accountability. Your reaction becomes their distraction. Your pain becomes their power. But once you go quiet, fully, unapologetically quiet, the only thing they can hear is the echo of their own behavior. And that echo is louder than anything you ever said. Now this is where the real dynamic flip begins. When she sees your silence not as a tantrum, not as withdrawal, but as freedom. You didn't go silent to wait for her. You went silent to return to yourself. You became unavailable not because you hate her, but because you finally realized that you deserve better. And that realization? That's the mirror. That's the moment she begins to see not just what she lost, but why she lost it. The beauty of this approach is that it forces both people to confront the truth. Your silence demands honesty. Because in noise, people perform. They defend. They posture. But in silence, there's nowhere to hide. And if you've detached fully, if your presence has truly been reclaimed, she'll start to feel the weight of the imbalance she once ignored. This is where Stoicism isn't just philosophy, it's transformation. You don't need her to admit fault. You don't need her to apologize. You don't need closure. Your detachment is closure. And the man who no longer seeks validation is the man she begins to question. Did I overplay my hand? Was I wrong about him? Did I mistake his kindness for weakness? These are the thoughts that begin to build. Not because you tried to make her think them, but because you gave her nothing else to focus on. Remember this, women are emotional processors. They feel in waves. And often, their regret comes later, not in the immediate aftermath, but in the stillness that follows. So if you break that silence too soon, if you check in, if you message, if you react, you rob her of the opportunity to see herself. You step back into the frame. You make the story about you again. But when you stay out of view, when you become the mirror instead of the message, she has no choice but to sit with the version of herself that let a real one go. And here's what most men never understand. Being a mirror isn't about being cold. It's about being neutral. You don't reflect judgment. You don't reflect bitterness. You simply reflect truth. The truth of your absence. The truth of her choices. The truth of what it feels like when your energy is gone. And that truth, once felt, is almost impossible to unfeel. It's in the silence that she starts to remember. The way you showed up. The way you cared without being asked. The way you offered presence, attention, support, effortlessly. She starts to retrace the timeline. And what once looked ordinary now feels rare. Because you're no longer there to deliver it. Your absence elevates your value. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you finally stop giving without reciprocity. This is the difference between noise and power. Noise demands attention. Power attracts reflection. When you move with noise, you chase closure. But when you move with power, you become closure. And that's what Stoic relationships are built on, not external confirmation, but internal elevation. You rise by stepping out. You heal by letting her sit in what she created. And don't confuse this with punishment. That's where a lot of men misstep. This isn't about hurting her. It's about removing yourself from a dynamic that no longer served you, and doing so with quiet finality. That restraint? That refusal to react? That's what makes the mirror crystal clear. Because it removes the drama. It removes the narrative. And it leaves only reality. So now the question becomes, are you willing to be forgotten temporarily, so you can be remembered permanently? Are you willing to endure the silence, the doubt, the urge to check in, so that she can feel the full weight of your absence? Because if you are, then you understand the real definition of power. Not in controlling her feelings, but in mastering your own. Not in proving your worth, but in being it, regardless of who acknowledges it. This is the paradox of silence. It feels empty at first. But over time, it fills her head. Because the man who no longer explains himself is the man she starts questioning. The man who no longer reacts is the one she starts chasing. Not always in action. Sometimes just in thought. But thought is powerful. Thought breeds reflection. And reflection breeds regret. And in that regret you win. Not because you hurt her, but because you elevated. You became the mirror she never expected. And in seeing herself, she finally sees you, not the version who chased, not the version who explained, but the version who walked away with dignity and never looked back. 4. Attention is her ego's oxygen. Starve it. Ask yourself this: what exactly is she missing after the breakup, you, or the attention you gave her? Be brutally honest. Is she mourning your soul, your mind, your essence? Or is she missing that steady stream of validation you poured into her world, day after day, word after word, touch after touch? Here's the uncomfortable truth that most men don't want to hear. She may not miss you. But her ego? Her ego is suffocating without your attention. Because attention is her oxygen. And when you starve it, that's when the panic begins. There's something intoxicating about being wanted, being admired, being chased. And when she had you, when your energy circled her like a planet caught in her gravity, she didn't just get affection. She got power. Every time you responded to her post, commented on her story, liked her picture, texted "Good morning," asked if she was okay, you fed her ego. You validated her presence in your life. You reminded her, even when she acted distant, that she still had a hold on you. But now you've cut the supply. Now your energy is no longer orbiting her. And her ego, so used to that attention, it starts gasping. Not because it loved you, but because it was addicted to the effect it had on you. Understand this: the female ego is a delicate, sharp, shape-shifting thing. It doesn't need your love to thrive. It needs your gaze. It needs your reaction. It needs confirmation that she still matters to you. So when you go quiet, not just socially, but emotionally, you don't just disappear. You take her reflection with you. And suddenly, the mirror she used to check herself in, your eyes, your attention, your approval, it's gone. And that absence makes her question not just you, but herself. You think you're forgotten. You think silence means she's unbothered. But here's what's really happening behind that pretty picture she just posted. She's watching. Waiting. Not for your return, but for your reaction. And when it doesn't come, when this seen notification never arrives, when the double tap never hits, when your name doesn't show up in the viewer list, she starts feeling something she's not used to: doubt. That doubt? That's the beginning of the collapse. Because if attention is her fuel, doubt is the leak in her tank. It's the slow-burning realization that she no longer commands your energy. And that realization? That's what breaks her composure. Not your words. Not your presence. But your absence of validation. Let me be clear. This isn't about ghosting. This isn't about playing hard to get. This is about detaching from her ego's ecosystem. That means no happy birthday texts. No. Just checking in. No mutual friend recon. No likes. No replies. No views. You go black. Cold. Silent. Not out of spite, but because you've finally realized she doesn't get free access to your soul just because she once smiled at you. And here's where the Stoicism comes in. You'll be tempted. Your muscle memory will want to comment. Your loneliness will want to scroll. Your heart will want to peek. But don't. Every interaction, no matter how small, feeds her ego and bleeds your power. You think you're just being polite. You think liking her new photo is harmless. It's not. It's a breadcrumb. It's a signal. And she will interpret it exactly how her ego wants. He's still watching. I still matter. But when the screen stays blank, when the digital trail runs dry, she starts unraveling. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. She mistook your loyalty for weakness. And now you're showing her that your attention was never hers to keep. It was a privilege. One she lost. And without that privilege, her ego no longer has the comfort of control. And make no mistake, she will test you. She'll post something provocative. She'll drop a song lyric. She'll upload a throwback. Not because she's healed, but because she's fishing. She's throwing bait into the water, hoping you'll bite. And the moment you do, you tell her one thing. You still control me. Don't give her that power. Don't give her the satisfaction of knowing she still affects you. Because when you starve the ego, it either adapts or it breaks. And in that space, you reclaim yourself. You begin to recenter your life, not around her emotional orbit, but around your own internal compass. You start giving that attention you used to pour into her into your own growth. Your discipline. Your fitness. Your future. You begin to evolve. Quietly. Consistently. And as your focus shifts, her control shatters. There is something terrifying about a man who is no longer reachable. No longer visible. No longer reactive. That's the man who becomes unforgettable. Not because he begged. Not because he yelled. But because he simply vanished. With peace, with grace, with certainty. That's the man who leaves a permanent imprint. Because he was real, and now he's gone. And what's more, you begin to see her differently too. As the ego fades, so does the illusion. You stop seeing her as this unreachable goddess. You start seeing her as human, flawed, selfish, maybe even shallow. You realize she never loved you fully. She loved the power you gave her. The attention. The effort. The chase. But love? Love shows up when you're down, not when you're available. And now that you've stopped being her source, her spotlight, her trophy, you see her for who she really is. That's the power of starving the ego. It reveals the truth. Hers and yours. Because the man who learns to withhold attention doesn't become colder, he becomes clearer. He doesn't hate women. He understands them. He doesn't avoid love. He elevates it. He becomes the man who no longer invests in shallow validation. He invests in stoic relationships. Relationships built not on impulse or performance, but on depth, honesty, and mutual respect. So if you're still tempted to, just check. 2. Just like one post, pause and ask yourself, are you feeding her ego, or feeding your growth? Are you holding your power, or handing it back for free? Because here's the bottom line. When she no longer has access to your attention, she loses her emotional leverage. And in that moment, she begins to spiral, not because you ghosted her, but because for the first time, she no longer has control. And that's when she finally feels your absence, not as silence, but as consequence. You didn't rage. You didn't beg. You simply stopped feeding the one thing she never expected to live without, your focus. So now that you see it clearly, now that you understand what's really happening when you pull back, if this message hit you deep, and if you're ready to hold your frame and live from a place of strength, go ahead and like this video. And comment, number 1, if this resonates with you. And if you're ready to keep growing, keep evolving, and dive even deeper into the mindset of Stoicism and powerful, Stoic relationships, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. The next part will show you how to evolve beyond her reach, not out of revenge, but evolution. 5. Kill the fantasies she had of you. There's a version of you that exists in her mind. Not the real you, not the man with boundaries, values, and depth, but a projection. A version that bent to keep her, that apologized even when he didn't need to, that kept showing up even when she stopped caring. That version? He's the one she thinks still exists. And if you don't kill that fantasy, she will keep haunting you, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You see, she didn't fall out of love with who you are now. She detached from the man who became too available, too predictable, too invested in her at the cost of himself. And you need to understand this clearly. Women rarely leave men because they're weak. They leave when the man they were once drawn to disappears under layers of need, over-explanation, and self-betrayal. And here's the most painful part. She might not even realize it consciously. But subconsciously, she started viewing you differently the moment you stopped challenging her ego. The moment you became easy to read, to manipulate, to control. The man who once sparked something powerful inside her slowly morphed into a character she could predict. Every text, every response, every reaction. You stopped being a presence and became a pattern. But now you're waking up. Now you're learning to reclaim your silence, your energy, your essence. And part of that evolution means doing something most men never think about, killing off the image she still holds of you. Not for her sake, but for yours. Because as long as she thinks the old version of you still lives, she will always believe she can come back and find him. That belief gives her silent permission to keep you in emotional limbo. It gives her power, even from afar. So how do you kill the fantasy? You become someone new. Not overnight. Not with theatrics. But through consistent, inner recalibration. You eliminate the behaviors that made you easy to dismiss. You remove the responses that made you predictable. You evolve to the point where if she ever tried to re-enter your world, she wouldn't even recognize the terrain. This doesn't mean you get colder. It means you get clearer. You stop making decisions based on what will keep her interested, and start making moves based on what keeps you centered. You stop filtering your worth through her eyes, and start seeing yourself with brutal honesty. Were you too available? Did you compromise your values? Did you chase when you should have walked? Good. Own it. Now bury it. Because that version of you, the overgiver, the overexplainer, the overthinker, he's gone. You don't revive him for closure. You don't resuscitate him for one last conversation. You let him die. And in his place, you create a man who no longer needs to be understood. Who doesn't ask for a second chance. Who doesn't soften just to make her feel comfortable again. And yes, this new version might scare her. She might accuse you of changing. Of becoming cold. She might say, "You're not the man I knew." That's the point. You're not. That man she knew, he lived in her fantasy. He existed in the version of reality where she had emotional access to you anytime she wanted. That chapter is over. And it's not about revenge. It's about evolution. See, the mistake most men make is they try to get stronger while still being emotionally accessible. They lift heavier, dress better, make more money. But if she can still text you and get a response, if she can still post something and know you'll react, if she can still feel your presence orbiting hers, you haven't evolved. You've just repackaged the same product in a shinier box. And she knows it. True transformation isn't aesthetic. It's psychological. It's emotional. It's spiritual. You kill the fantasy by becoming a man who no longer plays the role she assigned you. You no longer overextend. You no longer justify. You no longer explain why you're doing better. You just are better. Quietly. Irrefutably. Consistently. And in that silence, she starts to feel the gap. Not just the gap between messages, but the gap between who you were and who you've become. The man she once dismissed now moves in a way she can't track. Speaks in a tone she doesn't recognize. Chooses in ways that aren't influenced by her presence. That's what shakes her. Not your indifference. Your unfamiliarity. She might reach out. She might try to test the waters. Drop a, "Hey, how've you been?" Or react to a story. Don't bite. Not because you're playing games, but because the version of you she's addressing, the one who would have jumped at the chance to re-engage, no longer exists. You're not rejecting her. You're rejecting the dynamic that used to define you. And here's the beauty of it all. When you truly kill that fantasy, you free yourself. You stop waiting for recognition. You stop hoping for closure. You stop believing that if she could just see how much you've changed, she'd come back. No. You change for you. You evolve so far that going back wouldn't even feel like home. It would feel like regression. The truth is, she never truly saw you. She saw a version of you that made her feel powerful. And now that version is gone. So now you become a ghost, not because you disappear, but because she can no longer locate the energy you used to give so freely. You no longer mirror her emotions. You no longer orbit her approval. You've become so self-possessed, so grounded, so deliberate, that even if she returned, she'd be met with a stranger. A stranger with depth. With presence. With silence. This is Stoicism in motion. Not the absence of love, but the refusal to be defined by it. Not the suppression of emotion, but the sovereignty over it. In Stoic relationships, you don't hold on to the past to preserve a fantasy, you burn it to create truth. And in doing so, you don't just free yourself from her image of you, you free her from the illusion too. 6. Level up without broadcasting. Let me ask you something. Why do you need her to see you winning? Why do you want her to watch you glow up, rise, rebuild? Is it for closure? For justice? For revenge? Or is it because deep down, some part of you still believes that your evolution needs her eyes to be validated? Here's the truth most men won't admit. They're not leveling up for themselves. They're leveling up for an audience. And that mindset? That's not power. That's performance. Real transformation isn't loud. It doesn't seek applause. It doesn't crave visibility. It happens in silence. In the shadows. Behind closed doors. Because the man who truly levels up doesn't need anyone to witness it. He just becomes it. That's what Stoicism teaches, not to suppress your strength, but to embody it so deeply that it no longer needs to be announced. It speaks for itself. You want her to regret losing you? Good. Then stop trying to show her. Just rise. Rise without cameras. Without flexes. Without curated stories. Because the moment you start posting for her, for them, for anyone, you're no longer focused on growth. You're focused on optics. And optics are fragile. They can be manipulated. Real power cannot. Here's the paradox. The less you share, the more powerful your transformation becomes. When she can't track your moves, she has no narrative to cling to. She doesn't know if you're hurting. She doesn't know if you're healing. She doesn't know if you've replaced her or erased her. And that not knowing? That's the mental loop that triggers curiosity, insecurity, even obsession. That's where the true reversal begins. But let's take it deeper. Why is it essential that you level up in silence? Because it proves that your transformation wasn't for her. It wasn't to win her back. It wasn't to prove anything. It was because you finally decided to return to yourself. The man you were before you diluted your essence to keep her comfortable. The man who doesn't need external validation to feel valuable. Most men fumble this. They break up, hit the gym, change their wardrobe, start posting motivational quotes. They're not evolving, they're reacting. That's not power. That's panic. Because the true glow up is never about the surface. It's about the internal shift. The moment you stop being emotionally available to chaos, to drama, to disrespect. The moment you start setting boundaries, not out of pain, but out of principle. So how do you level up in silence? You do the work. Day after day. Without announcement. Without needing feedback. You show up for yourself. You build routines. You develop discipline. You eliminate distractions. You surround yourself with people who sharpen you, not drain you. And you stay consistent, even when no one's watching. Especially when no one's watching. That's the difference between noise and legacy. Noise demands attention. Legacy leaves an imprint. The man who levels up in silence creates a presence that can be felt, even in absence. He doesn't need to remind her of his growth. She feels it. In the space he used to fill. In the silence he maintains. In the peace he's no longer willing to disturb. And here's the twist. When you truly embody this kind of evolution, you don't want her back anymore. Not because you hate her, but because you've become someone who no longer fits the mold of who she needed you to be. You've outgrown the version of yourself that made her comfortable. And in that new reality, she doesn't belong. Not because she's bad, but because she's a relic of a past you've buried. That's what makes it powerful. That's what makes it irreversible. Because you're not just pretending to be better. You are better. And that kind of man? He's rare. He's dangerous. He's untouchable. He doesn't react to bait. He doesn't revisit wounds. He doesn't seek revenge. He moves with clarity. With conviction. With quiet strength. You want her to question everything? Then become the man she'd never recognize. The man who no longer reacts, no longer explains, no longer waits. The man who doesn't need closure, because his growth is the closure. And the wildest part? You won't need to tell her. She'll see it. Not in your stories. Not in your posts. In the way your absence becomes impossible to ignore. This is what Stoic relationships are built on, not emotional theatrics, but centered presence. Not performance, but embodiment. You don't need to shout your progress from rooftops. You just walk in rooms differently. You speak with weight. You carry yourself with precision. You radiate self-respect. And people feel it, long before they see it. So let her wonder. Let her scroll. Let her ask mutual friends. But don't give her answers. Let your silence be the only update she gets. And when she realizes that the man she thought she could come back to no longer exists, it won't be because you told her. It'll be because you became unreachable, not physically, but energetically. The man you are becoming doesn't care who's watching. He's too focused on becoming unshakable. He knows that validation fades. Applause dies. But self-mastery? That endures. That leads. That liberates. And if this message struck a chord with you, if you felt the fire of that truth in your chest, then you already know what to do. Like this video, comment, number 1, below if this part hit home, and subscribe so you don't miss the next stage in mastering your evolution and embracing true Stoicism in every step of your journey. We're just getting started. So here you are. After walking through the fire of silence, discipline, evolution, and true emotional mastery, something inside you has shifted. And it's not just the way you see her, it's the way you see yourself. That, more than anything, is the real power you were after all along. Because this journey was never about changing her mind. It was about changing your standard. Not to become colder, but to become clearer. Not to play games, but to stop being played. You thought you needed her to see you, to understand you, to choose you again. But now you understand the deeper truth. That longing came from a place of loss, not the loss of her, but the loss of you. Somewhere in the pursuit, in the proving, in the pleasing, you drifted away from your center. And this entire process, this silence, this emotional retreat, wasn't you withdrawing from her. It was you returning to yourself. When you act like she doesn't matter, not out of bitterness but from true detachment, you're not punishing her. You're prioritizing your peace. You're drawing a line that says, I will no longer pay a spiritual price to maintain emotional access to someone who can't meet me with the same presence. And that line is where the healing begins, not hers, but yours. She lost you when she assumed you'd always be there. When she underestimated the quiet strength it takes to walk away without explanation. When she thought your loyalty was a trap instead of a treasure. But your value isn't determined by how many times she regrets losing you. It's determined by how deeply you choose never to lose yourself again. And here's what they don't tell you. Once you fully detach, once you remove the emotional line she used to draw from, you don't go back. Not because you couldn't, but because you wouldn't recognize yourself if you did. That version of you. The man who ignored red flags, who kept giving without return, who feared letting go more than being disrespected, he's gone. Buried. And in his place stands someone far more dangerous, a man at peace. That peace isn't loud. It doesn't prove itself. It doesn't seek an audience. It moves with intention, with stillness, with presence. And that's what makes it so potent. It doesn't chase. It attracts. It doesn't react. It observes. It doesn't beg. It builds. And in the presence of that kind of energy, everything changes. Not just how she sees you, but how the world responds to you. The man who walks away cleanly doesn't need revenge. He doesn't need closure. He is the closure. He doesn't need to tell her she lost the real one. She realizes it, quietly, slowly, painfully, when she sees how unbothered you've become. Not fake detachment. Real evolution. Not petty silence. Sacred space. You didn't go missing. You went inward. And that space you reclaimed? That's where your new life begins. Because here's the final truth. The game doesn't flip when she regrets leaving. It flips when you stop caring if she ever does. That's the moment you win. Not because you got her back, but because you got you back. You're not trying to win her attention anymore. You're too busy mastering your purpose. You're not wondering what she's doing. You're too focused on what you're building. You're not checking her stories. You're writing your own. That kind of detachment isn't cruel. It's courageous. Because it requires you to step into the unknown. To sit in silence without guarantee. To walk away without a map, just a compass pointing you back to your own truth. And when you live there, when you start to feel at home in your own energy again, you realize something powerful. You were never chasing her. You were chasing the part of you that got lost trying to be enough for someone else. And now that you've stopped chasing, you can start becoming. Becoming the man who doesn't just attract respect, he commands it. Not with noise, not with flash, but with presence, with self-possession, with boundaries that don't flex under pressure. And what happens to her? Maybe she spirals. Maybe she regrets. Maybe she moves on. It doesn't matter. Because this story was never really about her. It was about the lesson she carried, the mirror she held up, the shift she triggered. She was a storm. But you were the ocean. And now that she's passed, you're still here, deeper, calmer, stronger. If you've stayed with this journey all the way through, then something in you already knows. You're not going back. You're not available for the same pain. You're not signing up for the same lesson twice. Because now you've tasted your own power. You've felt what it means to be emotionally sovereign. And once you've stood in that space, unapologetic, unshaken, there's no unlearning it. You don't need her attention anymore. You don't even need her memory. What you need, what you've always needed, is to remember who you are. And that memory? That's the one she'll never be able to erase. Because the man she thought she could walk away from is no longer waiting for her return. He's walking into a future where he's not just healed, he's whole. That's the real win. Not reunion. Not revenge. Freedom.